Hi, I'm Thomas Ruyle. I'm the lead writer-editor at the Joint Combat Camera Center at Fort Meade, Maryland. Today we're going to talk about the importance of captioning in still and video imagery submitted to the Joint Combat Camera Center through divots. First, we're going to talk about common errors and style issues and how to spot them. The most common types of errors noted at JCCC are misidentification of equipment, ranks, ships, weapons, and other items that you come across in your captioning. Misspellings or similar spellings, military terminology, acronyms and jargon, particularly those that are not understood by the general public. Probably the most important is keeping your date shot, your caption date, and your veering date the same. It's extremely important to ensure that all three of these match. An image shot, for example, on the 4th of October 2013 should have a veering starting with 131004, a date shot or a description date of 10/04/2013, and should read October 4th, 2013 in the caption. Please be sure to check all these items on your imagery before you submit it. Also, remember to use the month, day, and year format as described by AP Style. Keep in mind that the months of March, April, May, June, and July are never abbreviated. Don't use ambiguous terms like recently or last week. And if the date ends the sentence, use a period. If it doesn't end the sentence, use a comma after the year to indicate that there's more text within that sentence. Location. One of the most common errors that we find at JCCC is not describing accurately where the action took place within a still or a video image. When we're talking about locations, remember that words like here or locally are not locations. Please use the city or base and state and country if possible. If it's an undisclosed location, at least try to provide a general area, such as an undisclosed location in Southwest Asia. The words at sea are also not a proper location. Try to describe the body of water. If there are some kind of concerns about where you are in the world, perhaps use a fleet area of responsibility, such as U.S. 5th Fleet Area of Responsibility. Also remember that the following places are in Arlington, Virginia, and not Washington, D.C. Those include the Pentagon, Joint Base Myer-Henderson Hall, and Arlington National Cemetery. For release instructions, please ensure that your proper release status, released or FOUO, or for official use only, are included in the release instructions. It is the responsibility of the releasing official to ensure this is correct. Remember, FOUO assets do not go to divots. Please contact the JCCC and we'll arrange to get that into our system through other means. Military awards and decorations. First things first, they're never won. They're always earned, presented, or awarded. Earned is the best term to use. And with the Medal of Honor, please note that it's not the Congressional Medal of Honor. It's just simply the Medal of Honor. We have several types of articles, a, and the, when you're using to describe items that may come up in your captions. First, we're going to talk about the definite article, and that's the word the. It's used to describe a specific person and their unique position, or any kind of equipment that is unique or one of a kind within the military. For example, if you have a person commanding an aircraft carrier, you would refer to them as the commanding officer of the aircraft carrier. The definite article is also used before naming units starting with a number and ship types along with their names, such as the 4th Infantry Division, the 18th Airborne Corps, the aircraft carrier USS George H.W. Bush with its hull number CVN 77, or for example, the 8th Fighter Wing. There are two versions of the indefinite article, a and an. The big question is when to use either one of them. You'll use a when the sound following that is a consonant, such as a ship or a tank, and you'll use an when the sound following it is a vowel, such as an aircraft or an officer. Sometimes people do not use the indefinite article, and it makes for some awkward language, such as U.S. Navy MH-60 Seahawk helicopter flies over the Pentagon, when really it should say a, one of many, a U.S. Navy MH-60 Seahawk helicopter flies over the Pentagon. And now we're going to talk about common word errors found often in imagery submitted to JCCC and DIVIDs. Among the most common word errors are similarly spelled or similar sounding words found in JCCC imagery. For example, cavalry versus Calvary. The word cavalry refers to what are historically horse-mounted soldiers. These days, in the Army, you'll find soldiers who are in either tanks or Humvees and belong to a cavalry unit. Only capitalize this word when it's used as part of a unit name, such as 1st Squadron, 4th Cavalry Regiment. The word Calvary refers to the place where Jesus is said to have been crucified. Breach and breach, they sound the same, slightly different spelling. The word breach with 2 E's refers to a part of an artillery piece where rounds are loaded. The verb breach, B-R-E-A-C-H, means to penetrate an obstacle or defense. As a noun, a breach is that hole in the defense. The words rappel and repel, while somewhat similar, mean 2 entirely different things. Rappel, the verb, is to use ropes to lower oneself from a high place, such as a cliff, building, or helicopter. In the past tense, repelled. To repel, R-E-P-E-L, is to fend something off, such as insects or invaders. Ordinance and ordinance. This is one that bedevils a lot of editors everywhere. This is a very common issue that is seen at JCCC. The word ordinance, O-R-D-N-A-N-C-E, versus the word ordinance, O-R-D-I-N-A-N-C-E. Ordnance, without the I, generally refers to weapons and ammunition, things that go boom. The word ordnance is also singular and plural. There is no such word as ordinances. The word ordinance refers to local or municipal laws and regulations. The words hangar and hangar can often be confused. Hangar, with an A, is a building or a deck on a ship for storing aircraft. On an aircraft carrier, that area is called the hangar bay. A hanger with an E refers to something you put your clothes on in the closet. The word from is often used to describe a person's unit or service affiliation. In fact, the word from describes where a person grew up or where they're from originally. When you're describing a person's unit or service affiliation, use the terms with or assigned to. For example, I was with the 1st Battalion, 120th Infantry Regiment, but I am from Montrose, Colorado. With land bases, please use the word at, not on or aboard or other service-centric terminology. At Fort Bragg, North Carolina, at Camp Pendleton, California, at Andrews Air Force Base, Maryland. Another common issue is identification by placement within the frame of a photo. Remember, the correct style is to use commas and not parentheses to describe where somebody is within that photo. For example, if you have 2 people in a photo and the guy on the left is U.S. Army Private Joe Snuffy, you will write U.S. Army Private Joe Snuffy, comma, left, comma, listens to instructions from Staff Sergeant Hank Hill. We do not use parentheses under any circumstances. If you have 2 or more people within a caption and they need to be identified, use terms like center or right. If it's one person who is specifically identified, use terms like at lectern or on stage. As we write captions for still and video imagery that's going to be submitted to JCCC, it's very important to make sure that all the people who are identified in a picture, if they're affiliated with the U.S. military service, are properly linked to their service. If you have a person or persons within a caption who are identified by name and rank, and you know their service affiliation, always use the name of their parent service along with their name and rank. If you have a group of people or a person who are not identified by name and rank, use the type of service member they are, such as soldier, sailor, airman, marine, or Coast Guardsman, when referring to that person in your caption. Do not use both forms, such as Army soldiers or Air Force airmen. You wouldn't use the term Marine Corps Marines, would you? For example, we have Jane Smith. She's a yeoman first class in the United States Navy. Therefore, we're going to describe her as U.S. Navy Yeoman First Class Jane Smith. After that, we're going to describe what it is that she is doing, where she is, and the date that this action is happening. Also, we have Tim Williams. He's a tech sergeant in the U.S. Air Force. We'll describe him as U.S. Air Force Tech Sergeant Tim Williams, describe his unit affiliation, describe what he's doing, where it is, and when this happened. We have Chris Tryon, who's a sergeant in the United States Army. In this particular caption, he is described as being on the left, as we talked about with ID by placement. We also go on, of course, to describe his unit affiliation, what he's doing, give a date, a location, and the context of what's going on. If we have a person in the Coast Guard, such as Donnie Morales, who's a Petty Officer Third Class, we'll describe him as U.S. Coast Guard Petty Officer Third Class Donnie Morales, and again describe his actions, where it's happening, and when it happened. Not to belabor the point, but just wanted to show a couple more service examples. We have U.S. Marine Corps Colonel Randy Buzzcut, the commanding officer of the 3rd Marine Regiment, ordering his Marines to attention during a regimental formation at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, June 6, 2011. U.S. Army Specialist Joe Snuffy, on the left, talks to Marine Corps Private Joe Schmuckatelli, center, and Air Force Airman First Class Basil Scruff in the courtyard of the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, July 1, 2013. Very briefly, I'd also like to talk about describing accurately a group of unidentified people, that is, unidentified by name. Quite often, there will be captions and imagery that have a group of people who are not specifically identified. In this case, we're just going to use the type of service member that they are. For example, if you have a bunch of members of the United States Marine Corps in a group, but none of them are identified, we will identify them as a group of U.S. Marines, as seen in the top example. Likewise, if you have a group of unidentified members of the United States Army, in the frame of your photo, we will refer to them as U.S. soldiers. Here's an example where we have an identified person who is interacting with a group of unidentified people. U.S. Army General Martin Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, addresses sailors on the flight deck of the aircraft carrier USS George Washington, CVN 73, in the Pacific Ocean, May 6, 2012. We also can have a group of people from 2 different services doing the same thing in the same frame. U.S. soldiers and airmen with the Florida National Guard conduct a joint physical training session at Camp Blanding, Florida, October 1st, 2012. In that last example, you have soldiers with 2 different services, however, they're all under the Florida National Guard. It's okay to describe them collectively as soldiers and airmen. Acronyms are very common throughout all branches of the military. Keep in mind that when you're writing your captions, you're writing to a public audience who may not know exactly what you mean with an acronym. With acronyms and abbreviations, which we find throughout the United States military, unless it's covered in the AP Style Book or the DoD Captioning Style Guide, don't use acronyms or abbreviations on the first reference. There are some notable exceptions that the general public understands, such as NATO, US, FBI, POWMIA, USS, USCGC for Coast Guard cutters, USAV for Army seagoing vessels, and even RAF for the Royal Air Force, the second best Air Force in the world. If it's an acronym that will be referred to again in the caption, list the acronym in parentheses after that term is spelled out on first reference. The acronym can then be used for the second reference. For example, U.S. soldiers and airmen prepare vehicles for a Joint Operational Access Exercise, or JOAX, at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, June 8, 2013. A JOAX is designed to enhance cohesiveness between Army, Air Force, and Allied personnel. Although you may not cover Navy and Marine Corps aviation units as often as you will cover Air Force aviation units, Navy and Marine Corps aviation units are detailed on page 16 of the current edition of the DoD Captioning Style Guide. One thing to note is we don't use unit nicknames for Navy and Marine Corps aviation units. For example, Navy Strike Fighter Squadron 124 would be written as Strike Fighter Squadron in parentheses VFA 124. On second reference, we would simply use VFA-124. Similarly, in the Marine Corps, for example, we have Marine Heavy Helicopter Squadron HMH 206. Again, on second ref, we could simply use HMH 206. When you're dealing with shorthand and jargon, it's always good to ask a couple of questions of yourself. Does it make sense to you, and will it make sense to the public? Maybe will your parents or your family understand what you're talking about? If you don't think they will, it's probably best to write it out on first reference. Common examples of shorthand and jargon include words like forecastle, which is short for the word forecastle. This is a Navy term used to describe the part of a ship where anchor chains are stored. We go ahead and spell it out because the term forecastle is not very commonly used by the American public. Unit abbreviations are very, very common and is something that can be easily avoided. If we have a unit such as 1/120IN, let's go ahead and spell it out on the first reference. 1st Battalion, 120th Infantry Regiment. I've already listed the example of JOAX. Sometimes we run into staff speak or other terms that are not commonly used by the general public, such as bounding overwatch. That's a fancy way of saying maneuver. Likewise, battlefield circulation is a fancy way of saying visit. Sometimes you'll come across terms that may be corporate or brand names, such as Bambi Bucket. That is a specific brand name. Our style is to not use brand names, and so we'll use something similar such as helicopter bucket or just bucket. These are buckets that are used by helicopters to fight forest fires. In the Air Force, of course, everybody knows the term FOD walk. Well, we go ahead and spell it out. It's a foreign object debris walk down, or removing debris from a runway or a flight deck. Again, with unit abbreviations, the Marines often have abbreviations such as 1-3 Marines, or simply 1-3. What that translates to is 1st Battalion, 3rd Marine Regiment. Other common examples of shorthand or jargon are performs visual identification, simply means identifies. Retrograde mission, which means withdrawal, whether it's supplies, personnel, or units. Fire muster competition, that's a Navyism for a firefighting competition. And key leader engagement, that means meeting. And then sometimes you get staff officer speak in there, like efforting. We're all efforting that, sir. No, we're going to make it happen. Now we're going to talk about a few items that are specific to the U.S. Air Force. Among Air Force specific turns of phrase that are commonly encountered at JCCC are phrases such as taxis down a runway. In most cases, when an aircraft is taxiing, they're on an apron, a ramp, or a taxiway. Flight line is also okay. Try to only use the word runway if the aircraft is actually taxiing on a runway. The word jammer is often applied to the cart that loads ordnance into an Air Force aircraft. For non-Air Force personnel, this term does not immediately translate to ordnance truck or some similar nomenclature. For example, many people read it as it's an electronic jamming device of some sort. It causes a bit of confusion. So just remember, what's good on the flight line may not translate well into your caption. On occasion, Air Force personnel are detailed to take photos of Marines and soldiers in action. When that happens, be sure to talk to the command of that unit to ensure you've got the proper unit name. While the United States Air Force keeps it simple, every numbered unit is unique, such as 13th Fighter Squadron or 509th Bomb Wing. These are all separate and distinct units, whereas in the Marine Corps and the Army, it gets a little dicier. Army and Marine Corps units can get very long, But something simple like 1st Platoon or Bravo Company or even 3rd Battalion are not unique. There are a lot of 1st Platoons, Bravo Companies, or 3rd Battalions within both the Army and the Marine Corps. Look for a regimental affiliation in order to ensure the unit name is long enough and complete enough to ensure that you're describing a unique unit. For example, when describing U.S. soldiers with Alpha Company, 3rd Battalion, 82nd Airborne Division, we don't quite have enough information to make this a complete, unique unit. When we go back and find that these guys are also with the 319th Airborne Field Artillery Regiment, we have now added enough information to describe a unique unit that is correct and that there are no other units such as that. Remember to always spell out all elements of the unit name. Don't use shorthand or abbreviations such as CO for company, battalion, or BN for battalion, or BDE for brigade. A similar Marine Corps example is where you have Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit. Properly done, the photographer will go back and determine that this is Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 6th Marine Regiment of the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit. This is a case where we have found the regimental level, and the battalions that fall under that comprise that unique unit. Refer to pages 13 to 15 of the current DoD Captioning Style Guide for more on Army and Marine Corps units. Again, refrain from using acronyms or shorthand in unit names. A good rule of thumb is to ask your subject for a full unit name. If they're not entirely sure, go to their senior leadership. They will get you the correct name. There has been a slight change to photo credits as applied to the Air Force over the past couple of years. On the active and reserve side, always use U.S. Air Force in your photo credit, as in U.S. Air Force photo by Tech Sergeant Chuck Yeager or U.S. Air Force photo by Senior Airman Hap Arnold. However, on the Air National Guard side, we use a similar format. We use U.S. Air National Guard photo by Staff Sergeant Curtis LeMay or whoever may have taken the photo. In this case, we do not use individual state guard units such as Missouri Air National Guard. Always use U.S. Air National Guard regardless of your state affiliation. There are a few upcoming changes to the DoD Captioning Style Guide which we hope to have out by early 2016. Let's take a look. The DoD Captioning Style Guide is available under the Resources tab at our new website, DIMOC.mil. There's also an alternate portal to DIVIDs for sending your imagery. If you're having transmission issues or have FOUO imagery to send to the JCCC, please email us at jccc@mail.mil. The new DoD Style Guide will see several new glossary entries, including these. Combat Rubber Raiding Craft. This is a Navy craft used by boarding parties and special ops personnel. Do not refer to it by any other name. Corporal's Course. This is a Marine Corps style item referring to a course for E4s. It's often spelt with an apostrophe in the word corporals. We use it without the apostrophe. It covers all Marine corporals. The word Daesh. There are several variants of this spelling. It's a term used locally in the Arab world to refer to members of the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. We try not to use this term, only in context if it must be used. Speaking of ISIL, we always spell out on first reference Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant when referring to those people in Iraq and Syria. ISIL is acceptable on second and subsequent references. Similarly, there's the term ISIS. We try not to use that. It's another way of referring to Islamic State. Again, the preference is to use ISIL. LCM stands for Landing Craft Mechanized. It's an Army vessel similar to a U.S. Navy landing craft utility. Always use lowercase when you're identifying this particular type of craft, unless you're referring to a specific one, such as Landing Craft Mechanized 8596. The acronym is acceptable on second reference. Post-deployment and pre-deployment. Per AP, post-deployment is hyphenated, but pre-deployment isn't. The word ranger, when referring to soldiers who are rangers or Army Ranger units, this word is always capitalized. Redeployment, no hyphen. Replenishment at sea. This is when a large Navy ship gets supplies from another Navy or military sealift command ship. The term is always hyphenated. Submarine. Spell it out. Please do not abbreviate as sub. West Point. Here we're referring to the place where Army officers go to get educated. We always refer to it as the U.S. Military Academy and then describe its location, at West Point, New York. World War I and World War II. We do get a lot of historical imagery or current imagery that refers back to historical events. Always spell out World War I and World War II using Roman numerals. Coming up in the next year, DIMOC is going to roll out what is called a controlled vocabulary. This is going to apply to keywords, locations, service shown, and command shown. This is going to limit the number and type of keywords, locations, service, and command shown that are available to you, the shooter. In this way, it's going to help make your imagery much more searchable when people go to look for it in an archival setting. We're also going to add a new chapter on submitting to both DIMOC and DIVIDS. Most imagery will go through the standard DIVIDS portal, but if you have older imagery that needs to be archived, please send it to DIMOC. The instructions will be in the new style guide. The form DD-2537 is no longer mandated with videos. Slates will suffice. As mentioned previously, release status has changed a little bit. Another item going along with this is that the release status is no longer required in the caption credit. However, it is definitely still required in the release instruction fields. For example, your caption credit will read U.S. Air Force photo by Tech Sergeant Chuck Yeager. However, in the release instructions part of the metadata, it will have the releasing authority's name, their position, their unit, a good contact number, and or a good contact email. One other item the DIMOC is working on is to condense the DoD Captioning Style Guide into an iPhone and probably an Android app. This is something that many people have requested over the past couple of years as an easy field expedient way to refer to the style guide without having to lug a 50-page document around. We don't have a target time yet for that, but we're hoping for early 2016. The overall themes of the upcoming update to the DoD Captioning Style Guide are these. Great captions begin with you, the shooter. It's on you to get all of the information. This is all archival captioning, and it's on you to get that history written on the first try. Everyone along your chain, your NCOs, your public affairs officers, your buddies, play a role in crafting great captions. Don't hesitate to go to your buddy to have him read what you've written. DIMOC is always here to help. We're also always taking feedback, suggestions, and requests for assistance. Feel free to contact me at 301-222-6209 or email me at thomas.m.ruyle.civ@mail.mil. Well, I hope this has been informative for you. Just remember, a great photo is only half the story. With a great caption, your great photo is going to rise to the top.